Hello and welcome to the Argyle HR Leadership Forum, Workforce Wellbeing, Retention, and Engagement. My name is Vicki Limbrunska with Argyle. It's great to have everyone joining us today. Just a couple of notes before I turn things over to our esteemed speaker for this session. Throughout today's event, you have the opportunity to win a prize, so please do check out the prizes and raffle rules tab of the interface to see how you can earn points. Also, this is very important to ask questions throughout the session. Simply type into the Q&A chat and we'll address your questions at the end of the session. And now, without further delay, I'd like to introduce our speaker, Melissa Green, former Senior Director, Human Resources, Shared Services, North America and Canada at Foot Locker. We are so excited to have Melissa with us for a keynote presentation titled Engage, Retain, and Thrive, supporting multi-generational teams in the workplace. Welcome, Melissa. Over to you.
Thank you so much. It is so wonderful to be here. Before we get started, I am a presenter that believes in active participation in the chat. So just want to make sure that everybody is aware of that. If you need me to adjust my volume or anything, by all means, don't hesitate to pop that in the chat. Hello and welcome everyone to the HR Leadership Forum. I am glad you're here and also want to congratulate you because your presence today shows your dedication to creating a workplace where employees feel valued, supported, and engaged. In our time together, we'll dive into practical strategies for engaging and retaining talent across multiple generations, and then also look at how we help your team succeed, but also thrive as well. So without further ado, let's get started. What I just, announced and what I just said, in terms of engage, retain, thrive, and supporting the multi-generational teams in the workplace, that's a really big title. But let's take a minute to pause and ground ourselves in today's objectives. While the title may, be fancy and it seems like it's big, at its core, we're really here to focus on three key things. One is aligning DEI efforts and diving into strategies that enhance employee retention and overall workplace harmony. Two, bridging generational differences, with a laser focus on improving collaboration and inclusivity. And then the third one is building a culture that retains talent, creating an environment where people feel valued and where they just really want to stay. But before we jump in, I want to take a moment to introduce myself to everyone. My name is Melissa Green. We can go to the next slide. My name is Melissa Green, and I am an HR practitioner that just believes in driving human capital strategies and really doing that in such a way that connects with the business objectives and pushes organizations towards growth. I'm passionate not only about HR, but talent management, employee relations, and really underscoring all of that with leader development. In my spare time, because I don't work all the time, I, am a cheer mom, and also I enjoy participating in martial arts competitions. My daughter and I have a black belt in martial arts, and my son is currently training to work towards his black belt. I am actually a mom of three. My oldest son is an aerospace engineer and he's off, being great in the world. So, really excited for him as well. So I'm going to take a pause because, as I said before, I really do believe in audience participation. And so, one of the things that, very shortly, I'm going to pull up a slide and it's going to have some questions for you. And those questions are really about, what is your name, right? Where are you from? And what do you hope to receive from this session? So I'll take a pause, give, folks a moment to pop that in the chat. Want to be able to hear from you and welcome you into this session. And then we will be on our way. So I see that we have Michelle. Welcome in, Michelle. Let's see who else we have here. Allison, Olga from New York. I see Forrest is from Oregon. Um, let's see. Hi, Carrie. Good to see you as well. So, I'm not going to be able to make it to everyone. I see Dan from the Chicago Western Suburbs. I am a Chicagoan as well. I see Katie from North Georgia, and I know there are many others on the call as well. And so, just want to welcome you into the call. I'm going to move along because we just have a lot of groundwork to cover, and I really want to make sure that as you exit this call today, you really come away with, a sense of understanding, being able to understand how to drive your business, make impact. Oh, I see Joaquin from France. So I really want you to be able to walk away with some items here. So let's go ahead and take a deeper dive here. Let's, transition into the meat and potatoes of our presentation. So one of the things that I think is important as an HR practitioner is to really take a pause and understand when we talk about how we drive for success, when we talk about how we show up for business, is to also understand how we position our workforce for long-term success. And looking through that lens, what we've found is that there are really three key business trends. And those trends are about, making sure that the workforce has simpler digital experiences, that companies are investing more in technology, and then also really expecting to see increased outcomes from it. And so the question then becomes, how do we navigate this space to continue to show up functioning as an HR practitioner, doing all of the work that we're called upon to do, but also ensuring that we show up to help businesses drive forward? So with that being said, let's look at one of the first objectives that we aimed to cover today within this meeting. And that slide is, as you can see, it has action there. And this one is really around aligning D&I. And I saw someone in the chat talking about how do we navigate this, with some of the eliminations of policies and what's going on. And what I would say is that for some, DE&I is about race and ethnicity, but I truly believe DEI goes beyond those categories. And it's really about driving unique experiences and bringing those experiences together in an environment where we can share our lessons learned. These experiences shape how we show up in the workplace, and they bring different perspectives that ultimately lead to better ideas and solutions. When it comes to DEI and aligning these efforts with employee retention and creating a harmonious work environment, it's key to stay connected to how we do that and also build a healthy culture. There are a few strategies that can help make that happen. First, it's important that any DE&I initiatives align with the company's core values. When employees see themselves in the values and they feel respected, and they also feel like the organization is honoring what they say they're going to do, it gives them a sense of purpose. It's also important to ensure that we're creating safe spaces for employees to speak up and share their concerns and tell their stories as well. One of the things that I would say in a recent book that I read it's called The Inclusion Equation by Dr. Sarita Wong, is that, it shows that folks that feel valued, folks that feel like they're inclusive as a part of a team, that there is a high probability that they'll remain employed with the organization and continue to make advancements and continue to see the organization grow. Another important factor to consider is promoting flexibility in the workforce. As more companies are asking employees to return back to work, and I know we're all solving for that, it's crucial to understand that people are in different places in their lives. And so although we may be asking them to return back to work, it's also about ensuring that there's this flexibility where we can meet them where they're at. And finally, opening communication is absolutely critical. It's not only important enough to open that communication, but also make sure that your culture is transparent, where feedback is welcome, and not only welcome, but the key is also that it's acted upon as well. This in turn boosts retention and morale. In my opinion, and I would say that I think many others would agree from an HR perspective, when organizations embrace these strategies, they create a work environment where people feel seen, heard, and motivated to do their best work as well. So at this point, if you remember, we have three, objectives that we are looking to cover, overlaying that with how does that show up in the workplace. So we've just covered the action part of it, right? We've identified where we want to go. I want to take a pause. And as I said, I am a presenter that believes in getting people involved. I am not just a person that's going to come and talk at you. And so, one of the things that we're also looking is how does this overlay and interplay with multi-generational age groups? And so I think it's important just to take a pause and ask this question. What are some of the generalizations associated with various age groups? And as you can see there, I've listed the age groups, starting from the greatest generation all the way to Generation Alpha. I do know that some may say, why didn't I list Generation Beta? And Generation Beta at this point is probably a month old. So I think there's a little bit of time for us to understand and develop, what our study's going to say about those key milestones that impact their generation. And so while I am, allowing folks to, load their responses in the chat, I'll share a little bit about, and get this conversation kicked off. Myself, I am what you would call an exennial. So I'm a sub age group. Really nice way of just saying geriatric millennial. And some of the generalizations that I've heard about myself and my generation is that, we value autonomy. We are the last generation of, feral children. And so we value independence so much so that gets in our way. In terms of other age groups, what I've seen is that, age groups have been listed as, lazy or not tech savvy. So I'll go into the chat. Dan brings up a really great point in terms of that one generation can't communicate to another without a roadmap. That's a really solid point there. I've heard something similar to that as well, Dan. Michelle, yes, geriatric millennials. I prefer to use exennials because I don't know, I'm just in a phase in life. This may be TMI for this group. I don't want to necessarily be associated with being geriatric, right? Not at this phase in life. And so exennial just seems to kind of flow off the tongue a little bit better as well. Glad I am making a few laugh, and hopefully that's a takeaway that you did not anticipate. So with that being said, let's go a little bit deeper. I see that other comments are coming in about, society is saying that, certain generations want to work less, that, they aren't necessarily good at communicating, that certain generations are struggling with being in the workforce and not being prepared. So let's take a look at just how we can identify and address some of the generational differences. And again, the presentation will be shared. So don't want anybody to feel like you have to take screenshots, but it's right there available for you. What I would say is that, identifying and addressing generational differences is the key to building a collaborative and inclusive work environment. And while diversity can bring fresh perspectives, it also requires a thoughtful approach to communicating and setting expectations, especially when you're looking through how do you navigate your team dynamic. As I mentioned before, there are often stereotypes or generalizations about different generations. One of the things that I've shared before is the importance of, taking the time to understand these unique traits of each generation while avoiding assumptions and stereotypes. It's important to remember that people are individuals and not just a product of their generation. The other thing that I think is important to keep in mind when we talk about generational differences is that there are key milestones that ultimately have impacted maybe how people show up just based upon the experiences over a certain period of time. But also, there is a lot of commonality as well. So, for example, I'll bring up the economy. The economy is a soft spot no matter which generation you're talking about. It just shows up differently. And then there are different modalities of communication that come into play. It's important and it's extremely crucial that in the workplace we open up lines of communication and that we recognize that various generations may have a different way of communicating, but that doesn't necessarily mean that that's wrong. Some may prefer face to face, some may prefer text or email. And here's the thing, as leaders and HR practitioners, we need to make sure that we're helping our organization and our leaders understand how to navigate through that. Another key factor is creating opportunities for collaboration and promoting flexibility. We should encourage a variety of work environments and allow teams to work together. I've seen organizations do some things like mentoring, where they're pitting certain generations with another generation to balance out, you know, making someone kind of come around and understand what was and then what's cutting edge and what's new. And I think that's really a cool idea. It allows opportunities for us, that those that have unique strengths and experiences, to come together and contribute to a shared goal. The most important piece about really engaging employees along this multi-general landscape that we're working through right now is about embracing generational differences and intentionally addressing those differences. And so, what I would say to that is, don't put it off. Have those conversations, be open, but also encourage employees to come together and work to have flexible communication styles, work to talk about what are their strengths, how to drive innovation. This more inclusive and collaborative environments where generations can learn to work together with respect and openness, can leverage strengths, and then also push towards greater productivity and also employee satisfaction. Recognizing these differences as opportunities for growth rather than obstacles can help us build a more dynamic and cohesive workforce. And so, with that being said, we've focused on how do we action, how do we engage. Want to take a pause, and again, just teeing it up so everybody gets ready. We're going to take a pause, and I want to step back and bring back in some audience participation. So, within this slide, wanted everyone to just kind of take a look at this. I am a fan of Disney, and as I shared, I am a mom, so love kids movies, right? And I think there's just a lot that even still in my adult years, a geriatric millennial, that I can still learn. What you see before you is Space Jams. And for those of you that don't know Space Jams, what I would share, I'll share a little bit about it in a moment. But on my left is Michael Jordan's version, and on the right is LeBron James's version. And this isn't about who's the greatest of all time, but I will say I am a Chicagoan, so I'm just naturally biased here towards Jordan. What I would say is the reason I bring this up is because Space Jam is about a basketball player who gets pulled into another world where they have to play in a completely new and under challenging conditions. The team they join is made up of players with different personalities and skills, but they all have to work together to win the game. And then also at the end of it, there's a really big risk that if they don't win, these players can't go back to the reality that they know. I see a lot of parallels with this movie in our multi-generational workforce. Just like Space Jams, we have people from different generations with unique experiences working together. What's interesting is that when I think of Space Jams, I think of Michael Jordan's version, while someone from a different generation or has a different perspective about basketball, they may connect with LeBron James's version. These differences in perspective remind us that we all bring something unique to the table. So the question now becomes, how do we create a culture where everyone thrives? And how do we create a culture where we can embrace these differences, fostering collaboration, and then doing that in such a way where we retain and continue to build on a more dynamic and inclusive workforce? And so now we're going to transition into the third major point, right? We did action, we did engage, right? We talked about retaining, and now let's shift to look at how we thrive. Creating a culture that boosts retention is all about making employees feel supported and engaged. We all know this as HR practitioners, but I think it goes without saying that, when employees are connected to their work and their team and their organization's mission, they're more likely to stay. And then also they feel connected and want to help to build the organization to, a greater place, right? First remember the Space Jam example. Michael Jordan had to communicate openly with his team, understand their needs, and create a sense of belonging. It's about building an inclusive culture where everyone feels valued. In Space Jam, the team was made up of underdogs, but together their unique strengths led to success. Next, it's important to prioritize well being. And I know a lot of time well being gets a bad rap in terms of what does that mean? Does it mean meditation? Does that mean EAP? But I think well being is about helping employees get to a place where they understand how to navigate their work life and their personal life. And also, it's really important that organizations signal to employees that their health matters, however they interpret that. What I have found in just a recent study from Willis Towers Watson is that team members that are connected to their well being, as well as understanding their benefits package, and not just medical, dental, vision, but the full benefits package. What we have found is that team members also, have better employee satisfaction. And it's also tied to recognition as well. And also it drives productivity. Also, one of the other pieces that I think really helps team members thrive in this multi-generational workforce is fostering positive and collaborative environments. Employees feel more connected when they work well with their team. Also, leading with empathy and compassion is the key to making employees feel understood and cared for. And so, what I would say about retention is it's really this push pull, it's this delicate balance of, it isn't just about pay and perks, right? It's about creating this culture where employees feel respected and valued and know that their contributions matter. And all in all, when all of those pieces come together, employees tend to feel like they belong and that their work is meaningful. So we're going to go to the next slide and, want to just leave you with a few high points here about, how do we evolve our workforce? And I know we need to transition into some Q&A. In terms of evolving the workforce, as I mentioned before, it's important to stay connected to values and understanding that everybody brings their own unique values and experiences to the workforce. Additionally, communication styles, ensuring that we understand that based upon maybe where someone grew up, also to that end, ensuring understanding that based upon their generation they may have a different communication style, but allowing that to come forward in the workplace really helps us to continue to evolve, and understanding that all of these things come together for the betterment of the organization. Last but not least, I've spoken quite a bit about work-life balance, but also, rates of technology adoption and benefit participation. It's important to ensure that as we look at shifting and changing, to ensure that our businesses continue to play in spaces where we can show up for the future. we want to make sure that we consider these component pieces as well so that our employees continue to bring their best selves to work. So I see that, Vicki Lynn has been so kind as to post in the chat, a prompt for Q&A. So I will take a pause and just see from this group what questions you may have.
Melissa, we do have a couple of questions in the audience Q&A. I think we have time for one or two of those. The first question that came in is, how do you communicate traits of younger generations with a manager who comes from an older generation than most of the employees?
Sure. I think that's a very fair question. I think the piece is about getting out ahead of that and identifying to leaders that, employees are coming in, and here's some of the trends that they may see, and talking with them about what does that look like in terms of developing them for the workplace. I also think it's important that leaders consider mentorship and not doing a one size fits all approach. If we know anything about the workplace and how it's evolved, we know that that doesn't necessarily work. I think with putting those efforts in place, you'll find that you're able to transition more employees into your workforce, and that you'll find that they're successful.
Thank you. And I think we have time for one more question. Christine asks, with current climate of many companies withdrawing their official DEI strategy, what is your recommendation to keep the spirit and intent of the DEI alive?
Yeah, that is a pain point. I was expecting a conversation about that. Personally, I can tell you that's one that I'm even considering, knowing that I am a woman, I am a working mom, I'm a person of color. Again, what I think is important to keep connected with is that, we don't necessarily have to always use the terminology, because I get that, that for some is a bad word now. I think it's about, as I said before, ensuring that companies stay connected with understanding that it's okay to bring people in that are different, that don't necessarily have the same experience as you, and keep it connected to the business, keep it connected to work, as opposed to leaders having that conversation about race or ethnicity or ERG. If you function in that space, people want to find the best talent. So that becomes a lever of your business to drive. And in my opinion, there will, come a time where maybe we can have a more broader conversation about DEI. And at that point, you can start to bring forth some of the traditional pieces of what we've known DEI to be.
Melissa, unfortunately, we're out of time, but I thank you so much for this insightful keynote. Excellent, excellent keynote. And I want to thank everyone else for joining us today and for interacting with us today. This session, along with all of today's content, will be available on demand following the event. And for those of you who are in points throughout the event today, an Argyle team member will follow up with winners in the next couple of weeks. This does officially conclude the Argyle HR Leadership Forum. And I thank you all again for joining us and engaging in our content. And we look forward to seeing you at our next Argyle Digital HR event soon, which will be our HR Leadership Forum on continuous process improvement for organizational success on February 20th, 2025. Thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of the day. And thank you again, Melissa.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Have a good day.